summit, which is happening right now in Europe. And, I know you are big in the EU. You travel extensively throughout the years, obviously
Well,
pandemic
traveled.
aside.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so you have quite the following, and also South America, which is great. So
Yeah, not
we're
doing a whole lot of that this year, interestingly
yeah.
enough. There's something I keep hearing there's some kind of restriction on that for some reason. I
I
don't
mean,
know, but yeah, I
it's
keep
fine.
knocking on the doors and they keep telling me to go away. So
Yeah, exactly. We don't want your kind. Well, yes, you were watching the Spring One Tour October edition. As Mark and I are alluding to, we generally travel the show around the world, and we have lots of fun presenters that talk on various spring um, topics, subjects, and so we've kind of narrowed that down to a monthly show, which is a 2-day event, which you obviously registered for and are part of. So today, Mark is going to omakase us with some wonderful spring foo. That's Japanese and Chinese, and I apologize for that mix up in cultures. But he's going to mix us up. But I know foo is a thing in spring, so that's why I was trying to bring it in. Anyway,
well, yes,
uh,
and if we're talking food, like omakase, it probably makes sense to just call it fusion, right?
that's true. Yes,
Spring
excellent,
fusion.
wonderful.
So,
Spring fusion. I love that. And so, which is what LA has all the time because there's no
yes.
fall or winter there. It's just spring fusion. So
Uh, oh
it's a
boy.
weather joke. I'm a
Boom,
dad. I can
boom,
I can
boom.
make weather jokes. But yes, anyway, so today, Mark, you're going to be walking us through some amazing spring stuff. And then tomorrow, you're going to bring on some friends and we're going to do a chat with them, talking more spring tips and just wonderful stuff like that. Why don't you talk a bit about who's coming on tomorrow and what you're going to be doing?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I'm really excited about tomorrow. I
Yeah.
love doing what we're going to be talking about today and showing today, what I'm going to be showing today. But it's really cool and normally in a normal year, we get together and we get to have these kind of like ask me anything panel discussion, fireside chats, whatever you want to call them, where several of us just kind of get together and shoot the breeze and talk about things that are kind of like, hey, I heard this was happening, and what are we thinking about this? And people who would normally attend a Spring One Tour sit in the room and with us and just say, hey, wait a minute, you mentioned something or somebody mentioned something in one of the earlier sessions. What about that? Where are we kind of heading with that? And it really gives a nice opportunity to just kind of air some things and talk about things and just share, among however many people, 5, 10, 50, 200, whatever.
Right.
But we're doing it virtually tomorrow, and it's a fireside chat, so we have all we've all been told we have to have our fire up and going
That's
and
right.
be sitting by it because we have to do this right. But
It's not
Violetta
a fire
Georgieva,
away chat. It's a fireside.
right?
You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, we have to keep this
Aside it.
straight,
Yeah.
although we are in secret undisclosed locations, so that helps.
Correct. Yes.
But no, Violetta
Open your
Georgieva
bunker
is
windows.
is going to be with us tomorrow, and Greg Turnquist and Dave Sire, Dr. David Sire, and all of them bring different aspects of Spring Boot and Spring Data and reactive Spring. Whether it's talking about webflux, Project Reactor, Netty, all of them bring a lot of various different aspects of the Spring ecosystem. And there went Bob. We just blew him away. But they bring a lot of good different perspectives together where we can talk about things and kind of cover a lot of ground. And I will get to talk to some of my favorite people tomorrow, which is awesome. And you will, and anybody who's attending, you will get to talk to some of my favorite people as well tomorrow, and just to kind of pick their brain and exchange some ideas with them, which is a really a rare opportunity to get like this cluster of people together and just chat. So that's tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I thought my dog had like gotten out for a second, and
Uh-oh.
so I heard her barking, and I was like, that sounds like she's in the front yard, but fortunately she's not. So
Yeah.
anyway, otherwise I would have had to go get her. So I'm glad that
Yes.
she's.
Yes. Well,
But
that's
yeah,
another good thing generally about working from home. I am writing a book, as I'll mention here in a little bit, but I have a co-author, and that's my dog, who lies
perfect.
across my lap part of the time when I'm trying to write and trying to code, and helps helps me.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's that. If that doesn't merit
It's
an air quote, I don't know
That's right.
what does.
It's
But
emotional support. It's,
there you go.
you
Yeah.
know, and yes.
You
Well,
know,
they
and she,
say they have the bumper stickers. Dog is my co-pilot, so
yes,
might as well
and she
have dog as
provides
my
90% of
co-author.
the brain power anyway. So
Yep.
let's be
Right.
real.
Honestly,
So
yeah.
I just move the
so
fingers on the keys. So
so yes, tomorrow will be great. And if you have any questions that come up today, please feel free to put them in the chat, the Q&A. Sorry. And we have Yvonne who will be monitoring that. He might answer some we might keep until tomorrow, just so that we have some great stuff to kind of keep the show. Not that we're really going to be want for material tomorrow with the 5 of you, but or 4 of you. Sorry, but it'll be nice to kind of getting those Q&As to you, so that Dr. David Sire and Violetta, sorry, and why am I
Greg.
blanking on Greg?
Yep.
And Greg. I put Greg and Violetta
Yeah, I was
together
gonna
and called
say
Glorietta.
it's a mashup there. Yeah.
Anyway, so they'll be able to answer those questions tomorrow, which is great because, as you said, they kind of each have their own perspective and
Yes.
the way that they're working with Spring, and so you might get just a much larger picture of Spring, which could be a great thing or could be a confusing thing. But we're going for great thing.
We're going to go for great. And I noticed you did say 5 initially, and that's probably because, my dog is actually a better Spring developer than I am.
Yep.
So, we'll invite her in too. So
Perfect. So great. I think that's all I want. I need to be doing at the top of this hour with you is welcoming you, letting everybody know get the Q&As are happening. We're not going to be taking a break because it's just Mark's go, which is great. So hopefully you have your water next to you, and it's only going to be an hour and change, hour and 40 or so. So it's not like, we're not like watching a Lord of the Rings, where it's a 3.5 hour uncut so we'll be good.
Yes, which if we were, I would probably be one of the dwarves. So, just
that's all right. Dwarves are great.
Dwarves are great. Right.
So without further ado, everyone, Mark Heckler, enjoy the spring.
Oh, hey, thanks everyone. Oh, yeah, love it. Yeah, and we actually, there's no hard time on as far as time limit in terms of what we're going to cover. We may not go the full hour and 40. We may hour and 10, hour and 45. I mean, I don't know, because that's the cool questioning, puzzling thing about the Omakase talk is that I kind of just choose what interests me at that point in time. And by interests, I don't just mean, well, that sounds cool. What I try to do is pull from things that are being asked, or things that are new to a particular version of Spring, or things that perhaps just have surfaced on Twitter, or that somebody's pointed out and said, hey, this would be incredibly useful. Why don't you share that, or whatever. So I try to kind of choose from the best of many different options. So that's the Omakase, the chef's choice. So I guess I'm the chef, which if any of you have eaten my food, you know that that's a dangerous proposition anyway, but here we are. So, okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So that's the one. And then we'll probably do this inception thing. No, it went straight to this, which is good, right? All right. So can you see that? Let's see. I see my little head in the TARDIS over there, but can you see the slides? Can anyone confirm?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. All right. Then awesome. Let's carry on. So if anything goes off the rails, no pun intended on the whole rails joke, but if anything goes awry, please let me know and I'll correct as soon as I can. I do typically say this is a fast-paced live coding adventure. It's still the live coding adventure, but it's not going to be quite as fast-paced because I don't have to try to shoehorn in an hour and a half of material into 45 minutes or 50 minutes. So I'm going to scale it back just a little unless I get really excited and start, accelerating. And if I do, please somebody just say, hey, slow down a little bit. You're talking so fast, I can't keep up. Because I do tend to get excited about this stuff. It is good stuff in terms of capabilities and tool chain and whatnot. So yeah, I know, a little nerdy, but what the heck. But yeah, I do think it's important to slow the pace just a little bit, since we do have a little bit of extra time, because that way we can savor, right? I mean, you don't rush into a very fine dining establishment. Well, you probably don't go to any of them right now, but if you were to, you probably wouldn't as they used to say in when I was a kid, duck in, gobble it up, and duck back out. So you don't go in to eat duck and turkey. You typically go in to savor, and that's what I hope we'll do today. I'll try to throttle back a little. But yeah, so welcome to today's Spring One Tour, talk on Spring Boot Omakase, what I call the production ready edition. Now, I've given the Omakase talk before, a couple or three times before. I've never done it this way. So again, this is kind of, it's a constant evolution. It's things that I find particularly interesting or useful or relevant or whatever. So I do start in with some things that I've covered a bit before, but I'm going to veer off in a different direction. And as you'll shortly see. So if you've sat in on this before, any of my Omakase sessions before, it's going to be different. So at least somewhat largely different. Anyway, so I'm Mark Heckler. As Bob mentioned, I am a Spring developer and advocate with VMware. I work with work on the Spring team. I work as a code committer, but even more importantly, to get out and work with folks who are using Spring to develop real world production applications. So I love to do both. I love to code and I love to talk, which kind of puts me right in the perfect position for this kind of thing. So yeah, I'm one happy camper. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, if you're anything like me, you think of them about 10 minutes after you click the leave meeting button, and that's fine. It happens to me all the time. But if you think of something you want to bring up that you don't think to put into the chat before we wrap it up, and if you do, by all means, drop it into the chat. But if you don't, that's fine. Ping me offline at mark@thehecklers.com or mheckler@vmware.com via email. But the level best way to reach me is on Twitter. I kind of live on Twitter. I'm trying to give that up. I can't. I don't know. It is what it is. Twitter is Twitter, right? You have to be there. So yeah, if you're following me, I'm on there pretty much 24/7. If you're not following me, why? But by all means, do follow me at mkheck on Twitter. And if you have questions, comments, or feedback that you want to share, by all means, do so there. But if you want to share them and don't want to share them with the entire world, my DMs are open. So just send me a direct message, and I get that too. So a little bit about myself. I have co-authored a couple of books and contributed content and code to several other books. I also have another one in the pipeline, which I'll mention momentarily. I am an architect and developer by background. And as you might surmise from the next point, where most of my expertise has been won, the background is in Java or the JVM ecosystem. I am a Java champion, Java 1 Rockstar, Groundbreaker Ambassador, and now a Google developer expert in Kotlin. I love Kotlin as well. I actually will be staying with Java today, but if you're a Kotlin head, that's great. I feel you on that. Kotlin is a wonderful language and just a great additional tool to put in your toolbox. So that's another talk for another day. I am, as I mentioned, a Spring developer and advocate. I also am the sole creator and curator of Spring Noticias en Español. Si eres hispanohablante, déjame extender tu voz. Let me share your resources with the greater Spanish-speaking community. If you are a Spanish speaker and you're producing materials in Spanish, that's cool. That's great. Let me help amplify your voice and get it out to the broader community. Everyone wins. This is something that I speak Spanish, not well. I speak English, not well, but I felt like I could contribute in that way and fill a gap that I felt like was there. So that was an area that I kind of stepped up to. So happy to help share the word. And there, by the way, there is a Twitter handle at Spring Noticias. So check that out as well. I am also a licensed pilot, which is amazing, the amount of trust that a government will extend to you. That's just crazy, right? But yeah, that was something I had wanted to do for years. I finally did finish up my training just in my copious spare time. Kidding. But I did finally go ahead and wrap it up, take the check ride and all that. And yeah, so for some time now, I've been a licensed pilot and enjoy once in a while getting up in the air and seeing things from a little different perspective. So that's kind of cool. So, all right. There is a new book coming out soon. And this was what I was talking about. I swore I would never solo author a book. So here I am solo authoring a book. And O'Reilly is publishing it. Presumably, I think it's the first of next year, actually, by the time the editing magic happens and all that. I'm wrapping up the content over the next week or two. But yeah, there's going to be some stuff that the folks at O'Reilly have to do to make this, formatted and published and pretty and all that. So at some point, I think they're just wanting to put 2020 behind them and start with a fresh, clean slate. Can't blame them. Completely appreciate that. So yeah, check it out. You can actually check out an early access version of the book at bit.ly or bit.ly.com, either one, bit.ly. Spring Boot book, that'll reroute you to the O'Reilly site. You can get access to the first few chapters and take a look, see what you think. And when the real book comes out, the full book comes out, you'll be able to check that out on O'Reilly's platforms or any of your favorite booksellers. So check it out if you want to. If not, well, next slide. So the plan. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes. Mike Tyson. He's a great philosopher. You probably heard of him. And certainly a philosopher with gloves in the ring, but he once said, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." Hopefully, there will be no mouth punching today, but yeah, I do think it's important to realize that I have a plan for how this is supposed to go today, and this may not work. So we'll start with that, and we'll adjust as needed as we go. So, kind of the plan for today. Configuration. I want to talk a little bit about configuration, not as much as I have in times past, but certainly I think it's good to point some things out because the whole theme of today is production ready. And I think it's important to understand how your Spring Boot application will interact with its environment. Many times I say an application is not an island. And sometimes I mean that to be that, hey, it has to deal with other applications. And typically we think of a microservice architecture, but even monoliths are not fully isolated, right? They typically interact with other systems in their environment. But that leads us to the second context when I say an application is not an island, and that's that your application should be able to, and by necessity, deal with the environment in which it's running. And I'll talk about that a bit, and then we'll take it from there to use that as the kind of the beginning part of the conversation to launch into security. And we'll talk about who's who in the zoo and what do they do. Talk about authentication and authorization. I'm not going to go crazy deep into this. I actually have a talk that I talk about forms-based authentication and OpenID Connect and OAuth 2. I'm going to cover some of the basic parts of the forms-based authentication and how we do authorization in Spring Security and the auto configuration that Boot helps you do to make your applications more secure right out of the gate. We'll talk about and show imperative versus reactive on how to implement that. It's pretty simple, at least at some level, to get things more secure in your applications. And Spring Security, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole just yet, but with many tools, with many libraries, with many components in our environment, in our field, we typically want things to be easy to get up and running fast. And most of the time, what that means is zero security, right? And we've seen that play out many times very badly. Mongo is a great example, but I like to point out that Mongo's problem is not just Mongo. Mongo's problem in many cases is the developers that it's targeting. And that means me too, right? Because when you make something extremely easy to get up and running, typically you knock down a lot of barriers. And what that often means is when a developer goes to deploy that to production, they keep the same configuration they had in development. And if that is an insecure configuration, guess what gets deployed to production? That's a recipe for disaster. It's completely understandable. It's just not probably ideal. So Spring Security kind of takes that opposite approach, which is the most secure it can be by default based on what limited information you may be giving it at the time. And that ties in very nicely with Spring Boot's auto configuration. And I'll go into that and show you that as we go as well. Deployment, I think this is a very interesting and broad topic, but Spring Boot was not the first tool chain to come up with executable jars or deployable, Uber jars or fat jars, if you wish to call them that. But I feel like they've taken it to new levels. I feel like they, and I think it's pretty demonstrable that Spring Boot takes it far further than anyone else has and in a better way. Because Spring Boot, a Spring Boot deployable jar, executable jar, consists of nested jars. So rather than try to tease apart all the different dependencies and extract and mix and mash and mix and mesh, I should say, the different dependencies and try to make them all work via shading or some other mechanism, Spring Boot actually creates nested jars, and that gives you some really good capabilities. It also keeps you out of potential legal problems if you have different licensing and rebundling restrictions on any dependencies that you pull in, any libraries that you license or use. But it also gives you a lot of capabilities in terms of expanding that executable jar, which I'll show and talk about as we go as well. And then, of course, containerization, because most of us are running our applications in containers now. So Docker, Kubernetes. Anybody hear these? Probably, yeah. OCI images, anyone? So yeah, so we will be talking about, and I'll be showing you how Spring Boot makes it easy to containerize your application. And there's more, we'll be talking about more things along these lines. Tomorrow, Dr. Sire will be bringing in some Graal VM goodness as well to chat about. And yeah, so you have to cut it off somewhere though, right? And that's it. So let's code. This is one of my favorite people, Maurice Moss. If anyone doesn't know Maurice Moss from the IT crowd, check it out. I think they're still on Netflix. If not, they should be. So by all means, check it out. It's a little dated now. I mean, you can even see a CRT, I think, back there behind him in the GIF, whatever it's GIF, I guess, technically. But yeah, just really, really interesting stuff, fun stuff. So,
Mark, you should definitely watch the IT crowd.
Yes, you definitely should.
So much fun.
Yes. Who is that? Is that Paul?
I don't know how well that went, but
oh, that was Bob. Okay, well, yeah, that was my second.
Moss? Did you think Moss really came in?
No, I didn't. Sad.
All right,
sad.
I'll go back away now. Sorry.
You here all week, Bob? Bob's not
well,
here.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere for a very long time.
Well, that's unfortunate. Okay. Anyway. All right. So yeah, as bad as Bob's jokes are, he always knows that as long as I'm in the chat with him, his jokes will be better than somebody's, and that's mine. So, I try not to be that humorous because I'm frankly not. But if I do tell a funny joke, know that it was completely unintentional and you have my apologies in advance. So, all right. So all journeys, when it comes to Spring Boot, start here, right? They don't have to start here. I do like to be clear about that. I mean, Josh loves to point out the start.spring.io. It's a great place to go. It's one of my favorite places as well. However, if you, for whatever reason, don't want to pull this up in your web page, your web browser, that's fine. You can curl it, you can HTTP it, you can usually get to it from most major IDEs. And that's fine. And one thing that's that's really nice about the initializer is it exposes an API. So whatever way you gain access to creating your initial Spring Boot project, it's all the same. It's entirely consistent. So if you like to go here, as I do, because it's really a pretty site, right? Or if you're I started to say cubicle mate, but most of us don't have those right now. So if your teammate who's located halfway around the planet, let's say that she likes to go through terminal, right? So she's command line driven. So she likes HTTP, which by the way is an awesome tool. You'll be seeing that today as well. If you don't know HTTP, brace yourself. It's awesome. But let's say she likes to go through HTTP and hit the start.spring.io Spring Initializer via command line. That's cool too. You get the exact same downloadable unit, right? The same artifact from the Spring Initializer, regardless of how you get there. So completely consistent. It's up to you. I do like to go here for a couple of reasons. One, because it is kind of nice, right? And it's a great launching point. It helps you kind of see what you're choosing. You don't have to remember parameters and flags, which is cool. I do like, and this is a very minor feature that's kind of blinding, right? So if you're not a dark mode person, that's perfectly fine. You just come in here like with all your other tabs and everything's bright. But if you're dark mode, that's a little glaring, right? Or jarring, if you will. Bob. So we don't, I mean, if you're kind of in the zone and you flip and you open up a new start.spring.io tab and bam, you get this, it does tend to kind of throw you off your game. So I like to keep things dark mode. It's a setting that's remembered. It's a small feature, but hey, it's really, really nice. So the other thing that I'll show you momentarily is the explore button, which I feel like is useful on so many levels. Again, a small feature, but super, super nice in many, many ways. So I'm going to create just a sample project here, and we're going to build out from there. So I'm going to even now, I guess I should say you do have some choices. So you can create a Maven project. If you're used to using Maven for your build system, you can create a Maven project and get started fast. If you're a hipster, you can create a Gradle project here. So you just click that right there. This is the hipster button right there. But I'm not feeling it today. I don't even have my hoodie on, so I'm going to stay with Maven. You can choose Java, Kotlin, or Groovy. We'll stay with Java today. I'm going to stay with the current version of Spring Boot 2.3.4 because there's nothing that I necessarily need to reach forward for a milestone or a snapshot to grab that I want to show today. So that's cool. I'm just going to change the group number because my stuff doesn't execute unless I have this proper group name in here. Kidding. But why not, right? So we're going to create, let's say we'll call this Omakase. So that's cool. That'll be our project name. And let's see, Spring Boot Omakase. All right. We're going to use jar packaging because this is the 21st century. We don't really need to reach back and do war packaging, and that's a good thing. I'm going to use the production, the LTS version of Java, which is Java 11. We do support back to Java 8. That's our baseline for Spring Framework 5, Spring Boot 5.x, I should say, and Spring Boot 2.x. But 11 is the current long-term supported release. 15 is the current version of Java, and we do support that as well. However, let's face it, most organizations are going to be on the long-term supported releases of Java because they don't like to churn every 6 months. So we'll stay with that today. That's fine. Do what makes you happy. And I'm going to add some dependencies here. And for today, I'm wanting to cover just a few different things. I'm going to bring in the dependency for Spring Web, which, as it says, allows you to build web-based applications. That seems like that'd be a good thing. I'm also going to bring in reactive web because we're going to play a little bit with webflux. Not a lot, but I just kind of want to show you a couple of things there. And let's see, I want to bring in actuator because this is, again, production ready Omakase. So we'll bring that in. I'm going to bring in Lombok because I'm a lazy developer. Lazy good, not lazy bad. I just like to be very clear about that. But this Lombok is kind of polarizing. Some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people like it for production. Some people don't. I like it for demos because it allows me, as it says, reduced boilerplate code. I think it's entirely a valid debate in terms of do you deploy it to production? But yeah, for demos, I think it's pretty unquestionable that it's a good thing. So I'm going to bring in the configuration processor again because we're going to be dealing with configuration properties. And as this says, it allows you to generate metadata to provide contextual help and code completion, which is super, super handy. And then, of course, as I mentioned, I want to show a few things on Spring Security, just some basic things and how it ties in with Spring Boot's auto configuration. So yeah, before I go any further with this, the explore button. This is really a nice little extra feature. You won't use this all the time, but I feel like it's so useful in several occasions. In the old days, if you created a project and you forgot a dependency or two, or you wanted to add something later, what did you do? You went back and you generated another project, you downloaded it, you unzipped it, you looked at it and said, oh, I'll copy that in. Now that's assuming that it's a little more esoteric dependency. If you know exactly what you're doing, it's easy to just to edit the POM or the build.gradle file, whatever. But if it was something that you knew was a little more intricate, you come back here, you generate it, download it, open it. It was a lot of extra steps. Here, you can go in and take a look at your project before you even do any of that. So you can kind of see what you're getting. Arguably the most important part in my mind is the POM, and that's probably why it opens to that, right? But it shows you the dependencies that you're going to get with this project. Now, when you create a project using Initializer, if you're not familiar, it doesn't generate your code for you. It doesn't know what you want to accomplish. I mean, it does create your main application class, main method, but that's it. What it does is create your project structure and brings in your dependencies that you've chosen. Now, these dependencies are starters, so they are not a million and one different dependencies to accomplish a capability, provide a capability. They are a capability level starter, a dependency that brings in all of the things, the other dependencies that are necessary to provide a capability, like the web, right? When it's create a web API. Now, there are a lot of things involved in that, and they're all here. And each of those sub-dependencies are version tested and synchronized against each other. So 99% of the time, this gets you out of that game of dependency whack-a-mole, trying to figure out when something stopped working and why. Well, only to find out that version 3 of library A doesn't work with version 7 of library B, and you have to find that, usually at great cost and time. But if you choose the starters here via the Spring Initializer with Spring Boot, it makes all of that go away. And if you do need to ever override or update a particular library, you can do that, of course. But again, 99% of the time, you don't have to, which is super, super nice. So anyway, I'll close that out. We're going to generate the project. I'll just save that to the desktop. And we'll open that up and we'll launch that in our favorite IDE, NetBeans. Ha, kidding. When I say that, sometimes people say, "What do you have against NetBeans?" Not a thing. NetBeans is an awesome IDE. It has great support for Spring Boot applications. You can see even here in the created get ignore file, we actually accommodate NetBeans there. You can also see that we accommodate STS. STS is a build of Eclipse that we support. Eclipse is also a great. Well, Eclipse is also an IDE, right? Let's be real. But not my favorite. It's a great IDE. It has a lot of capabilities. It's just for me, it's always felt like there are a few too many edges sticking out for what I wanted to accomplish in particular. IntelliJ is my IDE of choice, largely I think because it works well. It feels good to me, and it also the folks who are behind IntelliJ IDEA are also the folks who lead the development of Kotlin. So you might imagine it has excellent support for Kotlin as well. VS Code, so on and so forth. So yeah, NetBeans is cool. I just use IntelliJ for my daily driver. So use what makes you happy. Again, happy trees. So I'm going to go to the POM, and we're going to start off first. I'm just going to comment a couple of things out here. I'm just going to comment out the security, and let's comment out webflux. Don't really have to, but yeah, let's do it anyway. So that's cool. And we'll refresh our POM. And then let's go to our application properties, which I won't get into just yet. Let's see, application. There we go. Okay. Happy. How are we doing on time? We're good. Okay. So that's cool. Now, what I want to do for starters is just let's talk about configuration properties. So as those of you who may know me know, I love coffee. So I talk about coffee quite a lot, which gives me just an excuse right now to take a pause and refresh. So if you have them, drink them. I also talk about aircraft a lot, for obvious reasons. Love airplanes. So yeah, but today we're going to stick with, I would stick with coffee. Actually, one of the times that I gave this, somebody, gave me a really hard time, hurt my feelings. And they said, "What do you have against hot tea?" And I said, "Well, nothing. I didn't mean to feel and seem exclusionary. I, in fact, usually after about 8 p.m. at night, I start drinking hot tea instead of coffee. Up until 8, it's usually coffee. But yeah, so I didn't want to leave out the tea drinkers. In fact, Earl Grey hot is one of my favorites, and we might see some of that creep in here momentarily. But in honor of hot beverages, we'll just create a hot beverage class. And let's see, so some kind of properties here. Well, we'll want a name and a brew method. Let's keep track of that. And I'm going to use Lombok to create a data class for me. At data just tells Lombok, instructs Lombok to create my getters, my setters, my equals, hashcode, and toString methods. And that gives me the capability that I need there, but I also want this to be a configuration properties class. And I want to set the prefix to this to beverage, right? Okay, so now if I build this, the configuration, let's see, let me just go back over here. Yeah, this configuration processor, if I just build that file, what that does is allows me to now, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to be. Good. That allows me to now do this. So I have the support for configuration properties right here, and I want to set the name. Let's say, let's set our name here to espresso. Yeah. And the brew method, by the way, this does give you type safety as well. You can tell that it's expecting a string, and it will also verify when we use it. And those of you who've seen some of my Omakase stuff before, where I talked about the app value, doesn't allow you to even see if something is used because everything is referenced using app value using a string within a string. So Spring expression language within a string doesn't give you that confirmation like we see here. So espresso, let's say we're going to use a mocha pot to do that. That seems valid. And we can also do things like AeroPress. Let's go with AeroPress. That's my favorite. I actually have both, as well as many, many other ways to brew a good cup of espresso and various different coffee substances. But yeah, AeroPress is my favorite. So we'll go with that, I guess. All right. So we have our properties class. Now we see a red line here, and we see that it's not registered, which tells you that, hey, we have no way of picking this up, at least in our application. Fortunately, it tells us the hint. It says it's not registered via @enable configuration properties. It's not marked as a Spring component, and it's not scanned via @configuration property scan. In most cases, your Spring Boot application, by the way, we'll go out and do your component scan. As you see here, I just drilled into that. That's a meta annotation. So when you see at Spring Boot application, it does several things. It has a configuration, enables auto configuration. It does component scan. So this seems like, and it is, a very good place to put a configuration property scan for application as well. So boom, we're up and running. Now we need some way to verify this, right? So we have the capabilities to pull in now our beverage name and brew method. So let's just create a REST controller, and we'll say request mapping. Let's just skip that for now. So class, this will be our beverage controller, bev controller. Ooh, typing is going to be an issue. Probably time to take another drink of coffee. Okay, so let's say get mapping, and yeah, let's just start there. We'll do this here just to confirm. So this will be our greet spring one tour return. So let's see, we have our head and our title and greetings. Let's see. Oh, actually, the title should be Omakase, right? Why not? And then /title /head, and yeah, that's cool. So then we'll do an H1, and we'll do a greetings spring one tour /H1. Okay, so that gets us set up with just an initial greeting. That's cool. And that way because I often forget to do that, I try to map to that. It tells me there's no page there. So now we have that taken care of. So let's do a get typing, get mapping, and let's go to beverage. So let's create a mapping for beverage, and we'll return a hot beverage, right? So get beverage, beverage return. And we need something to return, right? So we need to perhaps say hot beverage. And of course, it's telling us, hey, how do we get this in here? So we could create a constructor and inject that. We could do AutoWire field injection, which is evil. Don't do that. We're using Lombok, though. So I want to just make Lombok provide us with an all args constructor. And what that is Lombok will create a constructor with a parameter for each member variable, which gets us this. And Spring Boot will handle the rest via its auto wiring. And now I can just do beverage, boom. So let's run that and see what we have. If you have coffee, by all means, or other hot beverage, by all means, partake. Okay, we're up and running. So actually, I'm just going to go here and let's see. And HTTP. And again, HTTP allows you to sort of like Spring, right? It's not our tool, but I love it. It takes an opinionated approach. So you can curl this and provide everything, the curl, localhost, 8080, blah, 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 blah. But that's kind of cumbersome. So HTTP assumes if you don't include a machine name, that a host name, that it just assumes it's localhost. So we're going to go right to that. We put in the colon and the port number, and we just see what we get. Oh yeah, of course this isn't that pretty. So we'll come back to that. Let me just go here and do a localhost. Of course you have to do it here. There we go. So how nice. That's a little more formatted. So if we do a /beverage, what do we get? Beautiful. Just exactly as we expected. All right. So that's not terrible. That's pretty good. Now, let's see here. So what do I want to do next? Let's add in some security. Because why not? Because it's not really production ready until you add in security, right? Argue with me. Convince me otherwise. I didn't refresh my palm. There we go. Hopefully it'll do that in time. Let's find out. So now if I go to beverage, good. Okay. This is exactly what you want to happen. Now I'm going to cover a few of these things. With Spring Security, you have several different things that Spring Security brings to the table. One is the HTTP firewall, which by default, many different security compromises occur because of a malformed URI. And one of the things that the HTTP firewall does is it just filters these things out. So if you get a badly formed URI with special characters or bad characters, unescaped characters that can cause damage, it just eliminates those. If it gets a request that isn't a properly formed URI, gone. It just flushes it. If it does have everything properly in place, then that's fine. It goes ahead and processes it. There's a thing called a security filter chains, which I will mention here in a bit, and we'll actually talk about, and I'll show you some things about it as we go through. But the third thing really that I like to think of is kind of the three pillars, and there are many more features that Spring Security brings to the table for Spring Boot applications. But I kind of consider these three as the first among peers. And the third is the headers, because the Internet Engineering Task Force and the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, define different standards and recommendations in terms of exchanges, like headers that you provide in your request headers and response headers. And there are several things that out of the box, as I mentioned, Spring Security tries to configure based on, again, we have no configuration. We've provided no directives or anything other than just including Spring Security in our class path. We just literally just added this dependency. That was it. So it's making some best guesses in terms of the security profile it can support. So it does a few things, right? So it says, hey, there's no caching. So that way, if you do authenticate and you're logged into a page and then you log out and then you move to a different page, somebody can't just come back to your browser and then do a back arrow and go back and perhaps be logged in. I shouldn't say log out. So if you change your site, we don't want them to be able to go back and via cache have an authenticated session. So that disables the caching. Let's see. So what else? We've got our cookie transfer encoding. Basic realms. So we've got basic authentication. Basic authentication allows you to do things like work with user agents like I'm doing here. And you have no sniff for content. What that allows you to do is block any kind of user agent content sniffing. And that's very important because in many cases, in the bad old days and even still today, you can have user agents and browsers try to determine the content and then try to render it appropriately. So if your browser says this is a JPEG or a PNG file, it's a graphic file. Let me just go ahead and show that to you. That's not really a good idea because there can be things hidden inside that. So if there's JavaScript embedded within a JPEG, let's say, that allows you to perhaps be exploited through your browser just trying to do a good thing for you on your behalf. So we typically set the content type to no sniff. Your browser or user agent doesn't sniff the content and try to properly interpret it. It just shows it, and then you have to say, okay, go ahead and, yep, that's a valid file. Go ahead and render it or what have you. X-frame options is important to deny clickjacking. Or deny sets to where you can't, you block clickjacking. Because with frames, what you can do is have a transparent frame, for instance, over a button that you can click to do something, and it does something else, and you would never even realize it because it acts on that. You've clicked on it, you've activated something, and then it passes through the click to go ahead and, unaware, unbeknownst to you, to activate or do something else. So you want to disable your frames. You have cross-site scripting protection. And that's set to block all cross-site scripting. Now, of course, if you use a content delivery network, you may have to back off that. But again, we start from a position of an assumption of the best security possible to provide based on, again, very limited or no information provided. We see that we're getting a 401 unauthorized because I haven't authenticated, so therefore I can't be authorized for a particular resource. So let's fix that. Now, again, we've given it nothing. We've given our application nothing to work with. So how can it secure it? Well, we start off by looking right here. If we look in the log, we see that Spring Security says, look, you've given me nothing to go on. You've given me no user accounts to validate against. So let me just create a user, literally a user account called user, and generate a password. Now, this isn't ideal because every time you restart the application, this has to restart. And of course, you want to have each individual user uniquely identified because that way you have auditing. If you have 100 people logging in with the same credentials and you're somehow compromised, one, you don't know who potentially compromised you. And two, if you have to change a password, you're changing everyone's password. So not great. This isn't ideal, but again, based on no information we're providing, it's something. So I'm going to authenticate user and provide the password. And here we see that once again, we're getting this. And I'll actually just close off and just do a bear so we don't see all the headers there and get those out of the way for now. So everything works, right? So that's secure by default, again, to the extent it can be. Let's see if we can improve on this just a little bit. So that's Spring Security and Spring Boot's auto configuration working for you kind of hand in hand. But if you want to take things further, I mentioned authentication and authorization. Authentication is you demonstrating who you are. So if you've ever flown anywhere and you have to go and show your passport, if you've ever bought an alcoholic beverage, or if you've gained access to a stadium for a ball game, boy, all these things seem really quaint now, right? 2020. But if you've ever done anything and you've had to show a photo ID, you've authenticated in some manner. Physically, you've authenticated. You've said, yes, here I am. This is who I am. Verify. This is me. And then, of course, you do the Mr. Bean and you wrinkle up your face to match your terrible government issued photo ID. And they say, yes, yea, verily, you're approved. Go on in. So that's authentication. Now, authorization is, do you have access or should you have access to a particular resource? And I'll cover that momentarily as well. But if you, for instance, wanted some people to have access to the greeting, but not have access to the hot beverage, which now that I say that out loud, it sounds really terribly mean, because everyone should have access to hot beverages. But if you wanted to do that, that's a matter of authorization. So some people would be authorized to get here, and other people would be authorized to get to here. So authentication and authorization. So I'm going to do that by creating a class. We'll call this security config. And I'm going to extend the web security configure adapter. And we'll get into that momentarily a little bit more. So I'm going to enable web security here. And I'm going to override. Let's override that stuff later. Let's start off here with a bean. And this will be a user details service. And this is how we track who our validated or should be validated users are. So we're going to create a bean that is a user details service bean. So let's see. So we'll call this authentication, because this is what we're going to use for authentication. So I'm going to create a user here. So user details. And always, I'll use myself as a bad example because, let's face it, most of the time I am. So, so I'm going to use the user builder, and I'm going to say my username is Mark. Clever, right? And my password is bad password. I have terrible password hygiene. Probably should do something about that, I guess. But why start now, right? So roles. I'm only compromised once or twice a week anyway. And we'll build that. So yeah, seems legit. All right. So user details. And let's see, who do we have on here with us today? So I know Violetta's on here, right? I don't know if Greg and Dave are on here or not, but we'll use Violetta as our good example because I've already got the bad one covered. So user.builder, username, Violetta, typing, password. So we want this to be, let's say, a much better password, right? That's going to be kind of long. So let's just shorten this to m@b#p. There we go. Just for a demo, right? And we'll set Violetta's roles to user and admin because I trust her more than I do me. Okay, now I do want to do something, and this is not something you should do in production, but I think this is instructive at this point. So let's see. So Mark's password, and we're just going to take a look here at something. So let's see, Mark.get password, and we're going to duplicate this for Violetta. All right. Now, whoops. How did that happen? Return. Fat fingers. Okay, so I'm going to create a new in-memory details user manager. Now there are various different user managers you can use. I'm just going to use an in-memory one for the purposes of the demo, but typically you wouldn't do that in a real application. You wouldn't define your users this way in a real application. You'd create them and manage them, maintain them separately, and you would tie in with a user details manager, for instance, with Spring Data JDBC or an external Vault, for instance, or whatnot. But again, for the purposes of the demo, this works, and this will be fine for now. So Mark and Violetta, and we're going to just create that. Okay, now I'm going to run this, and we'll see something, maybe a couple things interesting here. Everyone with me still? Cool. All right. Yes.
What?
Oh, good. That's still Bob, right?
Who knows?
Bob,
at
you're
this
with me.
point?
All right.
I don't know if I'm still Bob.
You're still Bob. You'll always be Bob to me, Bob.
That's
All
right.
right.
By the way, I've
So
decided you need to open up your own coffee place. It's called Java the Hut, and you're welcome. All done. When you retire,
I love it.
it's just a little drive-up place, Java the Hut. All done. Bye.
He's here all week. Okay. So I'm just going to kill the authentication at this point and see what we get. And of course, we get the 401 unauthorized, which is exactly what we should get. So that's good. Things are still working there. That's always a nice thing to see. Always nice to test the things that shouldn't work, that to indeed, see that they aren't working, right? So let's see. Auth, Mark. So Mark and bad password. Now, interestingly, we don't see anything, but we see that we got a stack trace here. That's embarrassing, right? That's terrible. Well, not exactly, because this is exactly what I wanted to show you. So it says here, and it even tells you right here, there's a Java Lang illegal argument exception. There's no password encoder mapped for the ID null. Now that seems like that's a bad thing. What does it mean, no password encoder? Should we encode passwords? It seems like it ought to be a good thing. So let's go back up here and look. Because as you might recall, I logged the passwords, and you can see here that it looks like they're in plain text. And that's because they're in plain text. That's a bad thing. That's not what you want, right? That's never a good thing, to put your passwords and store them in plain text. So what it gave us a little hint here. Hey, look, there's no password encoder. So that means we probably should take the hint and create a password encoder, right? So let's see, password encoder, PW encoder, might as well shorten it a little bit, equals password encoder factories, create delegating password encoder. Now, the thing that I love about this is because security is a very fluid field, right? As all tech, but of course security, because it's this kind of leapfrog game, right? As soon as you come up with something, a great encryption scheme, a great encoding mechanism, somebody manages to break it because technology advances and people figure out clever ways around things. So if you hard code something in, and let's say that, for instance, well, let's go here. Let's just do this. Let me just show you here. So let's say that you were using MD5 and you said that's the be all end all, or SHA-1, SHA-256, whatever. Let's say SHA-1. So let's say you're using SHA-1 and you're like, nothing will ever break that. And then, 3 minutes later, you find out, and I'm thinking in the past here. So we're time traveling a little bit today. I do have the TARDIS behind me after all. And at some point you realize, hey, that's been broken. That's been compromised. That's not the ideal anymore. So you switch to something else. Well, if you have no way to easily do that, what you wind up doing is recoding a lot of things, changing a lot of your application innards, if you will. So what Spring Security did is they took that on and created a delegating password encoder. Now, as you can see here, bcrypt is the default, which is pretty solid, right? That's a good option, but you have other options here. You have options that haven't been discovered and incorporated yet or widely distributed yet. And we want to be able to accommodate those. So right now it goes with the default unless you specifically choose otherwise. But this allows you to create a delegating password encoder. If you have a user that you need to upgrade at some point, let's say you have an existing system that you're bringing forward and they are MD5 or SHA-1, it's just a matter of simply having them log in and then re-encoding the password so that it's transparent to them, which is super, super nice and useful. But I'm kind of getting a little off track here. So let's bring this back. We now have a password encoder that we're creating, and we just need to encode that password, right? So I'm going to do a password encoder encode, and we'll encode the password here. We'll also encode Violetta's password because, again, we've got to keep things safe. Encoder.encode. And let's go ahead and restart that and try again. So we'll see if we get a little better results now that we're actually properly encoding our passwords. All right, so let's try that again with mark and bad password. And now we're getting through as we knew we would, right? So if we go back and look here, and we now see that we've got an encoded password. Now, sometimes people look at this and they say, look, if this was ever intercepted, we can see this password. We can see that it's encrypted with bcrypt, what would stop someone from trying to decrypt that? Well, frankly, resources and time. So we're not actually giving anything away with this. This is a convenience thing for how Spring Security handles the passwords. But every method of encrypting a password or encoding a password has a tell, really. So if you can see here at the beginning, we see the same sequence of characters. So we can see here that this is bcrypt. It's just we're adding this in for convenience, but certainly you're not giving away any secret information and telling what you're using to encrypt it. But it is indeed encrypted, so we're back in business. So that's good, right? We're authenticating. Now the downside as of right now is that if you're authenticated for anything, you're authenticated for everything, because I can get to beverage and I can get to my greeting. Now there's one other thing that I want to show you, because this allows me to kind of take this in a lot cooler direction in terms of production capabilities. We also, actually, before I get into that, let's go here. So let's go to there and we'll refresh, and it's prompting me to log in. This is another neat capability of Spring Security that's auto-configured out of the box. If you don't provide a login and log out page, it will provide one for you. You can get a lot fancier with this. But Spring Security recognizes the idea that, hey, if you're enabling security, you're going to need some way to authenticate, right? So it plugs us in for you unless you override this. So mark, and let's see, bad password. And I'm in. Now let's check out here our beverage. We can get there. Let's also, because remember, I included actuator. So actuator, let me expand this. Oops. Let me expand that a little bit. Actuator out of the box is fairly tight, right? It doesn't expose a lot of endpoints. And that's because actuator can expose a lot of information about the internal workings of your application, its environment in which it runs, and many other things that are incredibly useful for us as developers and the SRE folks, but not good to share with just the general run-of-the-mill person who may have somehow gotten access to your system and you don't want them to have access. So any hostile actors you don't want to share really much more than this. We have a health indicator, which really doesn't do anything other than say, hey, yeah, the application's up. We have info, which doesn't really give us anything at this point because we've defined nothing in there. And then, of course, you have just the actuator endpoint, which brings you back here. And any kind of specific health, well, actually, there's nothing in there yet. So yeah, there's nothing to be gleaned from that. But just to give you an idea of the amount of information you can get from this, I'm going to expose all of my endpoints. Now, with Actuator and with Spring Boot's configuration, you can define what endpoints you want to include from Actuator, or you can define what ones you want to exclude, right? So management endpoints, web.exposure, exclude. So yeah, that was what I was going for. It just was not cooperating. So you can either specify by inclusion or exclusion. I'm going to include everything. Now, I do want to say, and please make note of this. Please do not do this in prod unless you build a complete security model. Okay, so because there be dragons here, right? And there we go, finally. All right. So I'm doing this for the purposes of a demo, and because we are going to build maybe not a complete security model, but certainly one that will give us a little more fine-grained access. So I'm going to expose all of my management endpoints via Spring Boot Actuator, and we're going to take a look at those really quickly. But certainly in production, you want to control who sees what, and you'll see why momentarily. So if I go back here, and we'll do a refresh, and of course I have to log in again. Mark bad password. All right. So we can see a few more, right? This gives us quite a bit more information. So if we go to beans, it shows us all of the beans that are enabled for our application, right? So we have access to all of these in our application context. And let's see, so our health, that's still health there, that's fine. Let's see, so config props, this is useful because as you remember, we have beverage, and I'll get into that momentarily a little bit more, hopefully. But we have our prefix beverage, and we have what? We have two properties, name and brew method. And here are inputs, which actuator will tell you exactly where you're getting those inputs. It's telling us we're pulling those from our application properties file, line 1, column 15 for our name. So if we go and double check that, line 1, and we can see here, I'm lined up on the name, espresso, the value, and we see here, column 15. So let me zoom in. Yeah, so it even tells you exactly in actuator where you're drawing that value from. This will be very useful here momentarily when I'm starting to pull this from our external environment as well. But this is just a good thing to be aware of even now. So let's go back here. Let's see. So what else? Yeah, one thing that I do want to share. Well, as you recall, I am just a user, and yet I can get to all of this. So it would be really good if we could maybe button this down. And by the way, let's see, where are some of the other things here? Yeah, there's env. That's a good one. Yeah, so this tells you your entire environment that your application is running, and it gives you everything pretty much. Goodness, this is stuff that you wouldn't necessarily want to share with a hostile actor, right? So good idea to button this down. Now, since you have Spring Security on the class path and you've kicked open the doors here with this, it will use your Spring Security model, your security model, to determine who gets access to what. So let's tighten that down just a little bit, shall we? So I already, I extended the web security configure adapter, and in an imperative Spring MVC application, this is, kind of the preferred way of going about this. I'm going to override a method, my configure method, and we're going to get rid of this, and we're going to configure our HTTP security. So I'm going to authorize requests, and I'm going to use an MVC matcher. And let's point this to, let's see, so actuator, and let's start there. That's fine. And has role, we want, let's say we only want admin users to be able to access actuator at all. Yeah, so that's good. And then we'll take any requests, so any other requests, and if they're authenticated, we'll allow those to pass through. And form login and HTTP basic. Okay. Now, why did I add these? Because these are included by default if you don't specify that information. So if we didn't have this, if we didn't provide any kind of, and this, by the way, is our authorization, we're specifying, in effect, a security filter chain here. So we're saying, check this against this matching pattern for any request. If a request, if a request resources requested, how's that? Say that 3 times fast. Matches this pattern, then we need to match this condition to grant access. Then you check here. Well, any other request, if they're authenticated, then you pass it through. We also, since we're not using auto configuration at this point, we're overriding that. We need to provide some means of logging in. So this creates a login form and a logout form, by the way, for us automatically. And HTTP basic just allows us to use user agents, non-browser user agents as well for authentication with as I did with the HTTP -- auth. So that gets us almost all the way there. I do want to point out that it's important to define the more specific things first, because if you put this, let's see if I can just, yeah, there we go. If I put, well, let me back up just a moment. In a security filter chain, as soon as a match is made, the request is processed. So by putting the more general matching criterion first, any request, if you're authenticated, you get access to everything because it'll match this. If you're authenticated at all, everything matches from there on out. So we're back where we started. So you always want the most specific criteria first, followed by the lesser specific, followed by the least specific or least restrictive. So here we're going to check against this, and then everything else, if they're authenticated, they have access. So let's go ahead and run this. And what this should do is only Violetta now should have access to any of the actuator information, any actuator endpoints. And I should not. I should no longer, which is probably a good thing. So let me go ahead and refresh, mark, and bad password. Okay, so I can get to there. That's fine. I should still also be able to get to beverage because, again, this is not specifically, again, the only thing that we've buttoned down is actuator. So now if I go to actuator, yeah, so, and it tells us right here, forbidden status 403. It doesn't give us any additional information that might be useful to an attacker. It just says, nope, you don't get in. That's it. Now, and this is something I didn't show you earlier, which gives me a good excuse to do that. a logout. So here's our default logout page, unless we specify one. So that's also very nice. Thank you, Spring Security. Now, Violetta, and I don't remember the password. Yeah, there we go. Emat. Yeah, I'll just copy paste.
Hey Mark, we have a question on how to use the health readiness and health liveness actuator.
Oh, that I actually don't get into in this talk because it just takes a little bit longer. It actually interacts with and interfaces with Kubernetes. And I will, well, let's see. I think there's actually a pretty nice write-up on that in the documentation. Remind me later on, and I'll link to it. And if I can't find that, then I'll go ahead and just whip out a quick example and share it out there in GitHub later on. But I don't think I'll have a chance to get to that today. But it's a pretty simple affair, really. It's a matter of enabling those for. And when you deploy to Kubernetes, Kubernetes actually will pick those up and use that as an indicator of your application liveness and readiness.
Thank you, Mark. I'll share that with them.
Yes, please. Yeah, and just ping me and on that and leave me a note, and I'll make sure that I do share that information. And again, if I can't locate it fast enough, I'll just create an example pretty quickly. But okay. So yeah, so actuator, we're logged in now as Violetta, and we see that we have full access to actuator again. So if I go to env is my favorite because it just tells everything, so yeah, so she has access to this. Now, what if you want to be a little more granular? Because right now we have it kind of as an all or nothing. So yeah, I mean, we should be able to do something a little bit maybe better than that. I actually really kind of like to I like to show some things like audit events, which are kind of interesting. So that's something that we can do here pretty quickly, I think. So let's see. Yeah, so add enable web security actually also is a configuration. This is a meta annotation, which includes at configuration. And as you can see, we're defining a bean here. So I'm just going to define, I'm going to cheat. It's not really cheating. It's just, it does kind of go along with security. So that kind of makes sense, right? So audit events, audit event repository. Yeah, that seems right. So audit event repository, and I'm going to in memory audit event repository. Now, this will, oops, typo. What this allows us to do, let's go ahead and just be daring, shall we? Because things never go wrong in demos. So audit events. So we want that to be an admin, and then everything else we want. Let's say we want me to have access to some of these other things. Maybe not. Let's go ahead and define another one here. Let's say env. Let's keep env out and make sure that actually I could just consolidate these. So let's do that. All right. Can I do this? Yeah. Let's do that. All right. So let's restart that. We're back. Okay, so it's prompting me to log in. Mark, bad password. Everybody's going to know my passwords now. This is terrible. All right, so I can get into actuator. I guess I should go back and just make sure I can get in. Yep, that's fine. So now if I want to get into beans, I should still be able to get into beans. But if I go to env, what happens? I can't do that, right? Because I specifically said only admins should be able to get into that. Now, let's see if I can go back here. And yeah, here are audit events, which weren't there before. Now they're there. Once again, forbidden. So let's go ahead and log out. And let's see, log out. And let's log in as somebody with actual power. That's Violetta. Let's see. Yes, okay, I remember the actuator. And if we check audit events, now this is something that's kind of interesting. And this is in the MVC portion, not yet in the reactive portion, but yeah, if time permits, I'll show you kind of some other things as well. But this tracks when you first pull up the page. Of course, it says, "Hey, anonymous user," and that's fine. You without a user being specified and entered, of course, it's going to be an authorization failure. So when I log in, we see an authentication request. Say that 3 times fast. And then I tried to access something I shouldn't have access to. And it tells right here, hey, authorization failure, access is denied. I try again in a different endpoint. So I tried env here and I tried audit events here, and that didn't work. I log in as Violetta and boom, we're in. So that all works a treat. So let's go to make sure she can get to env. Everything is unrestricted. Super, super nice. Yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of a nice thing. Let's see. I have notes here on stuff I want to cover. I don't want to skip blithely over points that I feel like are super useful. Yeah, I think, let's see. So let me go back and look at the code to see if anything jumps out at me here that I've missed. How are we doing on time? We're doing really well, I think. So yeah, let's go to the deployment. If I have time later, I'll come back and do some of the reactive stuff, but this I think gets us at least a good start. So the deployment stuff is super interesting. Let me stop this. And yeah, clear that out. And let's see, desktop and Omakase. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so if I do a maven clean package, then we can take a look here once it gets done. And this is just a typical build just from the command line, basically same as I was doing from the IDE anyway. Oh, I probably should kill the logging here just so that doesn't, there's no reason to continue doing that anyway. Oh, I restarted that. Silly. Okay, well, we'll stop it as soon as it restarts. Oh, I did not show one other thing. Actually, before I get too far into this, I do want to quickly divert. This is a very minor thing, but I think it's useful. So I'm going to set debug equal true, because sometimes people say, well, there's a lot of auto configuration going on. How do I know what it's doing? That's great. I appreciate that Spring Boot and Spring Security and every other Spring component that I'm pulling in here are working so hard for me. But how do I know what it's doing? It's a little disconcerting if you're coming from from an environment where you have to hand code everything. I mean, it's tedious and terrible in many ways, but you know what's happening because you've coded the gazillion lines to make it happen. So this is the auto configuration report. If you just do a -- debug, or as I did, just add a debug equals true in your properties, it will show you all the conditions that were met. Let me get to the top here. Yeah, I'm going to have to go a little faster than that, I guess. So it will show you all the conditions that were met, the positive matches, and the beans that were created on your behalf because of those matches. Now let me just page down through it, and then you'll see the negative matches, the things that didn't happen, the matches that didn't occur. So here we go, negative matches. So it didn't match this, the conditional on class. So this would be created if it found this class. It didn't find this class, so it just didn't create the active, or didn't execute the ActiveMQ auto configuration, so on and so forth. And then you get to the end. Let me just go a little faster here, and it will show you the unconditional classes. And this is one of them I like to point out is the configuration properties auto configuration. So this happens all the time, regardless. So it doesn't have to have a particular match. It will look for configuration properties as long as you include that, the scan. So it will look for those and enable those for use in your application, among other things, right? So this is your auto configuration report, which I think is kind of a nice little extra feature. I'll just go ahead and stop that. I commented that. So now I'm going to rebuild that again externally because that gets us where I wanted to be. So it works the same way as you might imagine. So if we do an ls-l target, we can see here that we have our executable jar, and that's a bit of a misnomer. It's called an executable jar because you have the ability to run it any place, execute it any place there's a JVM. But as you can see, it has no executable bit here. It's read-write and read-and-read permissions. And that's fine. We can still do the java-jar target omakase. Oh, there we go. I wasn't sure I hit the enter key because it kind of delayed on me a second there. But we see that we're up and running. And of course, it all still works the same. Mark, bad password. Did I type that wrong? I did type that wrong. Okay, and then actuator. Okay, so we're still in business, right? So let me log out. All right, that works. Now, One thing that I like to show, or some things that I like to show, is there is an order of precedence in terms of your application properties. Now, the properties that I defined were just here for a beverage name and a beverage brew method, and that's cool, right? However, let's say that these were your database connection strings. And this is something that can vary based on where you deploy this to production. And if you have an outage in one region, availability zone or region, you may want to or need to field another instance or several instances in another one, a different set of environments, right? If you have a failure with one URL, you might have to point to a different one. And you have this coded in your application. The thing I like to point out is application properties, or even the corresponding YAML files, or even profile specific properties files. These are kind of your place for sensible defaults. So typically when you deploy to a production environment, when you go to production, those values can and most likely will change. So these are the place for sensible defaults, but certainly you will be, in most cases, overriding those with your actual live production specifics, right? So for instance, if I want to do an export, so we'll say export beverage underscore name equals, let's say tea Earl Grey hot, not that hot. Okay, so there we go. And export beverage underscore brew underscore method equals steeped. Okay, so now if I do an env grep bev, yes, okay, so we have those. So now if I go ahead and run this again, there is an order of precedence, as I started to mention earlier, and I kind of segued into something else. So that the kind of the last resort is the internal application properties file or YAML file that you have for your application. You can externalize that. You can have environment variables, as we show here. So if we go here and we try to, well, let's just do a refresh. Mark bad password. Boy, I just can't seem to type that right. I guess it is a bad password. There we go. And we go to beverage. Yeah, so see, it picked up our environment. So the variable's out of our environment. Now that's good. That's a higher order of precedence than the internal properties, and that's fine. That's good. But we also have another, and there are several. There are 8, 10, 12 of these where you can go in various different levels. What I like to show is this one, because this is particularly useful. So let's see. So beverage dot, is it dot or is it underscore? I think it is dot here. So equals rack Dagino. Any Star Trek fans here? So beverage dot brew method equals, we'll just take the easy way out, replicator. Why not, right? It's not true Klingon coffee, but at least it should get us there. So let's refresh this. Mark bad password. There we go. So yeah, and this is extremely useful because, again, if you have, and you should have, sensible defaults defined in your application, but you need to be able to overwrite those as your environment, your deployment needs change without rebuilding, retesting, redeploying your application. Super, super important and super easy to do. All right. Okay, so that's the one thing. Now, as I mentioned, if we look at our target, ls-l target, so we see that this is not executable. It's very simple to make a, well, more fully executable application here. So I'm just going to go here and do a configuration, oops, and then executable true. So now, and we'll refresh that. Actually, now if I just do a, yeah, here we go. So we have a clean package. Habit I've gotten into. Here we go. All right, so ls-l target. So now we see that this actually is executable. And what this allows us to do, because instead of doing the java-jar, we can just point to the file itself, target Omakase. So it gets rid of the extra pesky java-jar, right? Because it's a lot to type. I'm kidding, but it is really nice because that allows you to more easily script things and use it as more of a fully executable application, right? All right, so let's see what's next. Oh, containerization. Do I have Docker running? I guess that's the key. Yeah, it looks like so. Docker PS. Look at that. All right. So I do need to copy paste this because I never exactly get this right when I don't, and then things go terribly wrong. And this is not essential, but it's something that I like to do. I like to add into the configuration here the image and the name that I want to use. Pardon me. Because I want this to be easy to put in my my image repository, and this just keeps my login and my artifact, everything consistent. So let's see this. Now, different ways you can go about this, but this allows you to, using the Spring Boot plugin, to go ahead and create your OCI image, your container image, automatically for you just in your build. So you can go through here, you can do the command line. I'll just do it here this time. I think last time I did the command line, let's just keep it even. So if I go here under Spring Boot, and I have a goal here of build image, so we'll just do that. And this uses the Paketo build packs, which will take your application and it will say, hey, look, that's a Spring Boot Java application, JVM-based application, and it will build your container image, your image around that based upon the things that it knows you need. It's fully examinable, is that a word? But you can certainly examine it. There's no mystery meat. It shows you exactly what's happening and what's in there and the versions of everything, as you can see, kind of just a hint of as it's going by. And it allows you to run that as a container. So, well, yep, and there we go. It's a very consistent process. It gets you out of the business of having to tinker with Docker files. Obviously, you can still do that should you want to, but this is a very nice, consistent way to build it. And of course, this is very automatable as well. So now if I go here and I do a Docker images, grep Omakase. Look at that. Yeah, it says 40 years ago because it's just the date stuff I haven't configured, but certainly we're there. So let's see. So if we do a Docker run -- name, we'll call this my Omakase. So yeah, let's do the ports. So 8080 to 8080. And let's see, we want to do the Heclarium Omakase. Boom. Now, let's see what we get here. And we'll do a refresh. Mark, bad password. And look at that. I'm back logged in. And if I do an actuator, and of course, the same permissions apply, right? So I try to do audit events, and it tells me, no way, absolutely not. Let me log out. And yes, and we'll do Violetta's login here, Violetta, and oh yes, actuator, and audit events, boom. Yeah, so everything is there, and access is still controlled the same way. It's just now we're running this from within a container, right? So let's see. So I guess is the other thing that there we go. Yeah, so everything is there. Super nice. All right. So how much time do we have? We have just a few more minutes. So let me stop that. All right. And give a very quick look at how things would change if you were doing this using webflux instead of WebMVC. So I'm going to uncomment that. And I think that was all I wanted to show on that in that regard. If not, then if I think of something else later, I'll come back and show you that as well. If not today, another time, or I'll add it into a repo. I actually don't have a repo with this created, so I'll need to push that out. But just follow me on Twitter. I'll announce when I've got it out there. So, all right. So all of this stays largely the same, but we need to change out our security just a little bit. So at enable webflux security, and we can get rid of this. Nope, get rid of that. Sometimes IntelliJ thinks it knows best for me what I want, and it just really doesn't. Sad. We'll get rid of that for the time being. And this is imperative, right? So we need a reactive user details service. And we won't be returning our in-memory detail service. We'll return our map reactive user details service. Again, with Violetta and myself there. This isn't overriding here. Oops. Nope. Wrong key. I'm looking around my mic and I'm hitting the wrong key. So, let's see. So public, and this would be a security web filter chain, right? And security web filter chain. And this is our server HTTP security. Everything else stays fairly consistent. Come on. Import class. There we go. We just need to, instead of authorizing requests, we'll authorize our exchange. And we change this from an MVC matcher to a path matcher. And here, path matchers. And we've created our server HTTP security. Now we just need to build it. So return build. And actually, this is a bean, right? Pretty sure. Because we need that to, not any request, any exchange. Missed that one. Almost missed that one. So let's see what we have. That's super tough, right? I mean, when people talk to you about changing to reactive, I don't mean to minimize the effort that takes, because oh, did I not? Yes, I didn't refresh my palm, because there is a change in mindset, right? So it does take a little bit of doing, but in many cases, that's one of the things that I absolutely love about the approach we've taken within the Spring ecosystem. We don't want you to check all of your existing knowledge at the door and completely flush it and change everything about the way you're doing anything. Matchers cannot be empty. So I need to go back. I've obviously missed something. But what we try to do is leverage the knowledge that you already have, because that gives you the ability to build on something that you've already built over the years, the knowledge you've amassed over the years, and not just, kind of throw that away with the assumption that, you have to learn an entirely different way of doing things, or else it's just no good at all. So let me, let's see here. All right. So that all looks pretty good. Reactive user details service, map reactive. Matchers cannot be empty. Well, that's fine. Oh, well, that is something, isn't it? So let's see. What did I have here before? Because I do have an empty matcher. So I had the audit events. Well, I must have just. I probably just did that. I hit the, one of the problems with having this wonderful mic right in front of you is you don't see your keys. So sometimes when I think I'm hitting the Command X, I'm hitting the Command D, and I'm just duplicating stuff. So let's try that. That seems like that should be happier. All right, so localhost 8080. Let's try to log in there. Mark and bad password. Yep. And beverage. Yep, and actuator. And of course, if we go into end, because we still have end blocked out, access denied. So pretty. All right, so let me go back and log out. And let's log in as Violetta. Look around my mic. Look at that. Okay, so let's go to actuator and let's go to our end again. All right, so we're back in. So that's all good. It seems like there's something else I was going to point out here. Don't know what it was. All right, well, if I think of it later. All right, so that's good. That's all working. So let's see, let me go back here and bring up these slides again. And we're sitting right at an hour and a half, so that's not too bad, actually. So let's go here. Yeah, so the resources, I will say that, let's see, kind of a summary of what we did, because I thought I had that slide in here, and obviously I don't. But summary of what we did, we talked about configuration properties and settings and how our Spring Boot applications can interact with the outside world with properties internal to our application as well as external to our application, kind of the order of precedence. And I showed you 3 examples of that: internal, environment variables, and then command line parameters. But there are many, many more. They're also in the Spring Boot documentation. Again, if you can't seem to locate them, hit me up. I can shoot you a link to that as well. Let's see. After that, we talked about security and showed how you can get to a fine level of granularity in terms of authorization. But first, before we get to the authorization, we can set up different accounts for authentication. So just proving who you are who you say you are. And then once you say, yes, yeah, I've proven I am Mark, right? Then should Mark have access to a particular resource? And we've clearly seen that that's not the case. In many cases, we don't want me to have access to a couple of different useful endpoints that I could somehow mess up or use to ill effect. But we establish different authorizations for different people based on levels of trust, and we codify those so their application can choose who gets access to what, who is authorized to access what resource. We use that to do that. We used actuator, which we also use to show where our environment, where our properties for our application are coming from, down to the line and column number in our application properties. But also, now that I mention it, I don't think I ever actually showed pulling those from the command line. Well, I hate to just jump back over and do this, but it's just got to happen, folks. So let's see if I do. Let's just run it here. Oh, I didn't expand it either. Oh, I just blithely skipped over that part. Oh, I've already got it running here. So let's stop that. I do want to go back and just show this. I won't go back and show I'll show the expansion too. It's quick. Why not? We'll still come in under an hour and 40. All right. So if we go here, go to our restore or refresh. Let's do Violetta. So we have access to everything. And if we go to our, I don't want end, we actually want to do config props. Config props, there we go. All right, so this should be pulling from our environment, right? So if I do a brew method, Earl Grey hot, yep, tea Earl Grey hot steeped, it tells you that it's pulling from a system environment property at this point, because here we actually have this, I'll just stop it. So env grep bev. So this is where it's pulling from, right? So it's pulling from our environment. And if I ran this, so I did a, actually, did I do this? Let's see, target, and let me refresh that. I didn't, but I'll just run it this way. That's fine. It's fine. It's all good. So if I refresh my config props and Violetta, I knew I should have referred to my checklist more just to make sure I caught everything. I skipped over a couple of really cool things here. So beverage. So we can see now that we're pulling in Ractogeno replicator, and we see exactly where it's from a command line argument. So many times, and I pick on junior developers here a little bit, but certainly senior developers fall into this kind of path of familiarity as well. So we see a lot of times that even those of us who have coded for a while will make assumptions that, well, this is happening because of this. Are you sure? Well, yeah, it has to be. Really? Well, let's double check and make sure that this particular property is reflected the way we think it's being reflected, and it's pulling a value from where we think it's pulling. And this gives you a very quick and easy way to do that and eliminate assumptions and get down to facts, right? So this tells you exactly what the value of a particular property is that you're counting on. In this case, this is very important. We deliver the Ractogeno, right? And it tells you exactly where it came from. Now, the other thing that I wanted to show you very quickly is that, we have our jar file, excuse me, I can't even talk now. So I'm going to just make a directory expanded. We'll just do exp. So what I want to do is jar-xvf, and we're going to take our target file and we're going to expand it. So now if we just do a tree. So here's our jar. The fact that we nest jars with Spring Boot means that we can extract the jars in their original form. So we've not repackaged, we've not potentially run afoul of any licensing issues. We've not shaded anything. We've not teased them out that way. We can actually just unzip the jars that are contained within the Uber jar, and they're completely intact in the original format, which is super nice. If we expand them like this is actually what the Pacato build packs do, right? So it expands them and it runs them like this. So if we do a Java dash jar, so let's see, org. Actually, this isn't right. I'm trying to think what I'm missing here. So let's see. Brain cramp here just for a second. I'm going to have to. Yeah, so it is just, yeah, okay, so it's just Java org, and then we've got our jar launcher. So it runs it just the same, right? So this is exactly what's happening. And the fact that we're nesting jars makes this super easy to unpackage and repackage and whatnot. So anyway, let's go back to here. We'll wrap it up, and then we'll call it a day. So yeah, more information. You can just follow me on Twitter for any tips, updates. Of course, if you're interested in the book, bit.ly.com/springbootbook, follow the account on Twitter if you would like. And if you do want, like I said, I haven't committed the code out here yet to this repo. I haven't created the repo, but I can shoot you a tweet later on and just say, hey, the repo's out there if you're interested in following along, playing with that, poking it a bit and seeing how it works on your machine. But that, I think, is it for the day. I would ask that you tune in tomorrow because yeah, it's just going to be a great conversation with Greg and Violetta and Dave, and I'm just excited to get to chat with them myself, and hope you'll come along. It should be a lot of fun. So with that, Bob, I think I will turn it back over to you, sir.
All right, I'm back. I came back on right on time.
He is back.
Thank you,
Bob
Mark.
is
That
back.
was incredible. That was so much useful knowledge, and also so much conversation about those hot beverages that you so greatly love.
Drink them if you got them. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. The background is wiping out my cup. That's so sad.
You got to put it in front of your face.
Oh,
in front of your face.
Oh, hey, look
There
at that. It works.
There
Yes, there we go.
The system works. What was your Star Trek reference that you made that I wasn't able to jump in? I can't remember what it was.
Ractigino. Yes.
Yeah, what is that?
That's Klingon coffee. Yeah, DS9 they drink that a lot, and yeah, that's good stuff. And of course, the replicator probably doesn't do it justice to like I've never heard him mention a specific Klingon espresso machine, but I'm thinking there has to be one, right? Because Klingons don't mess around.
No, I mean they can't stay that level of anger just naturally. Like it has to come from an outside source.
Maybe that's it. Maybe they are reliant upon the replicator for their Ractigino now. When they're so yeah. No wonder they're so cranky. Yeah. So.
Yes. By the way, as we all know, Shakespeare is better in Klingon. So much like coffee. Coffee is better in Klingon. Shakespeare is better in Klingon.
Yes, and frankly, the poetry of love. How can you beat it, right? So.
Look at that. All right. Well, yes, as you said, everyone, please come back tomorrow. And there'll be obviously any questions that weren't answered tomorrow with 3 other great Spring minds. And we will also just have other conversations about Spring. So, hopefully you enjoyed today, and tomorrow you will definitely enjoy because it has 3 times the fun with our extra guests. So next month, I might as well just give a little next month shout out to the Spring one, so that way people can jump on and register for that one. Next month is November 18th and 19th. Win a Spring testing trophy with Bella Bai and Alexei Nesterov, and so that way we'll have another 2-day great event. Go to springonetour.io, register, get it on your calendar. Because as I was looking through the Twitter sphere, apparently there's like Dell's got their conference going on right now, and which I'm sure is a very tiny, minimal conference that Dell would put on.
Who's Dell again? Yeah,
good old Michael Dell.
Yeah,
Uncle Mike, as we like to call him, and.
Tiny little company. Nobody's ever heard of Dell.
There's CF Summit. I think there's a couple other things happening. So yeah, this is you got to, now that we're all doing this stuff virtually from home, you got to get into your calendar early. So we're very thankful that you chose to be with us, and we want you to register for next month's And as always, we have on Tanzu.tv lots and lots of other great content. Mark regularly codes on Wednesday, not every Wednesday, but him and the other Spring Advocates take turns coding on Wednesdays. It's called Code. And again, that's Tanzu.tv. Our past episodes, if you want a reference to this one, are also on Tanzu.tv. I host another show called Tanzu Tuesdays with Tiffany Jernigan and Paul Charkovsky, and we have just regular Spring and Kubernetes conversations happening. And so, yeah, anyway, please come back tomorrow. We can't wait to see you, Mark. You're amazing as always. Thank you for your caffeinated energy and your dad jokes. Those are
well,
unparalleled.
Everybody else does bad dad jokes. I do bad jokes. So, you know.
Yeah, that's fine. you put the bad in dad. So anyway. All right. TTYL. Talk to you later.
See you tomorrow.
That's right. Live long and prosper.